All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another live stream in our Facebook group. So, we've got a really good one set up for today. And what I'm going to cover specifically is how to add 20K revenue, $20,000 of revenue every single month. And I'm going to go through the exact formula in which you can calculate that and exactly how it's going to not only break down on that first month and how you're going to get to the $20,000. But I'm also then going to touch on how it's going to stack every single month on top of that for the next few months. And it'll continue to do that. But I'm just going to outline about 3, 4 months to show you exactly how just by putting these systems in place, you'll actually be able to not only generate, in this case, the 20K per month, but also how that's going to continue, like I said, to stack every single month. And that number will continue to increase. And obviously when we're talking about stacking these sales and stacking cash on top month after month, it works because we continue to compound and we continue to do the things that are generating us money while also getting more money coming in from the people who we've already sold in the past. So that's the beautiful thing about putting these systems in place that generate us substantial amounts of revenue, but also then do continue to allow that money to pile up. And that's where we start to make some real money. Now, before we dive fully in and before I share my screen so you can take a look at what the numbers actually look like, because there's going to be a lot of stuff to follow along with, which is going to be super helpful. So if you're just listening to this, then I'm definitely going to suggest that you pop in and watch the actual video because it'll be a lot easier to follow along with. Sometimes when we throw a lot of numbers out, it can easily make our heads spin. So when you can actually see the numbers and digest that all, you're going to have a much easier time following along and really understanding and seeing the impact of what this can actually do for your business. So, the one really exciting thing that comes into play as we start to get a better understanding of statistics within our business and sales, and really just learning the ins and outs of what we need to do operationally. The beautiful thing is that this is all just math, and scaling and growing your business just comes down to math. It comes down to equations, it comes down to numbers that we can plug into those equations and really see what kind of tweaks we can make to have pretty measurable change within, our top line and our bottom line. And I know we've gone over that in some other videos where I've shown exactly how just changing one piece of your lead nurture or having your leads actually scheduled into calls, just by changing certain percentages there, by increasing the amount of people that you get in front of, that can have a huge impact on the amount of money that you collect, both short term and long term. So again, you'll get a really strong understanding of how this is all going to play out from just a mathematical standpoint. Now, I know we've all been in the place, especially growing up, where most of us, I'm not going to say all of us, but most of us probably didn't like math. And when we started our business, we also probably didn't realize the impact and the importance of what math actually plays into that. So it is really empowering when you start to get first an understanding of how math is involved, but also how we can use that to really project what our business can do, both in the short term, medium term, and long term, actually. And then we can really start to make some informed decisions based on being able to calculate what we're going to be able to bring in. And then there's a lot of decisions, obviously, that can be made based off of those calculations and those projections. That's how sales projections and everything actually get factored in, and how they get calculated. So I don't want to waste any time. I want to dive right into this because there's a lot for us to go through. And it, it's going to be some stuff that you can really take away and implement again immediately inside your business to make some measurable changes. Again, I always want to give you guys some nice short and impactful content that is going to allow you to see how important just changing these little details can really have a huge impact and an effect on your business. So we're going to talk about everything from how many dollars you should be spending per month on your ads, also talking about just the different nuances of what you need to do to get these numbers to equal that $20,000 of revenue per month. So I'm going to share my screen here. And again, like I said, our main focus is on that $20,000 number. So again, we're going off of, as we've been building in these conversations, we're building off of the pretense that we're all operating a 7-day free trial. Now, again, if you're doing something different, that's okay too. If you're doing a, let's say, 6-week front end offer or a 6-week challenge in which you're selling people on day one, that'll work. That will absolutely work. Your numbers will be a little bit different than what I'm outlining here because the process, right, the system you have in place and the number of steps required for your prospect to actually go from, again, just being a prospect into a member, there's a little bit of a differential there. So again, I can outline that, just a few different steps, but that's another very effective way to take these leads and turn them into your clients. So let's again operate under a few different pretenses, and I'll touch on those as we go. But the first one is going to be that we're all operating and running our front end offer as a 7-day free trial. Okay. So I've got some industry averages, which are outlined in the left column. And on the right column, we're just going to use some example numbers. And I'm going off of now just the consideration of, let's start with 100 leads, just to make math super simple for us. Let's say we get 100 leads a month. Okay. So based off of a percentage, an industry average of 60% of those leads coming in actually scheduling, we go from 100 down to 60. Okay. So now, if we say we've got 60 leads that have actually scheduled an appointment with us, half of them are going to show up. So half of them are going to show up for those calls or those meetings. And that now brings us down to 30. Okay. So now we've got 30. From 100, we've now taken it down to 30. And let's say on that first initial meeting that we have with them, we're going to convert again because this is a free offer. This is a low barrier offer. It's really easy to convert people. There is still a sale that needs to happen, even though it's free. But we have a 70% on average likelihood. Of course, as you improve your skills, those numbers will all start to rise up, which you'll see how that'll affect the actual dollar figure later. If you are doing any numbers higher than these industry averages, this is only going to play into your favor and benefit you even further. But now let's say we close on that front end, we close 70% of the 30 into actual trials. So they go from being prospects, now they're in our system officially as trial members. So we're at 21. Now, at the end of the 7-day trial, of course, we have our back end meeting or our feedback meeting. And the show rate on that, because we have such an engaged lead, they're such a qualified lead at this point because the likelihood is they've done at least 3 classes with you. So the show rate there is going to be very high. So now with an 80% show rate on average, we're going from 21, let's say 21 prospects in the trial to about 16.8. So we can round that to 17. About 17% of them actually showing up. Now, the back end close rate on average, you're going to be looking at about 60%. As you improve your sales skills, that number will rise up quite substantially. For me personally, within my facility, we're hovering anywhere between 70 to 80%. Okay. So again, you'll see as we go through this how rising or how bringing that 60% up to 70 or 80% will again have a huge impact on the numbers and the cash that you're collecting. So, but for the sake of this, let's operate as 60% is our back end close rate. So now what that means is we've got 10.08 or 10 back-end closes based off of 100 leads. And industry standard is for us to have 10% of all of our leads closed and converted into full-time members. That is a great percentage and somewhere around where we want to be. Anything above that is doing really well. Anything below that, we need to start looking at where are the holes in the system and what can we start to improve on to really get that number up. But 10% is pretty good. So for the sake of these numbers and for the sake of what we're working here, this is pretty much spot on exactly what the industry average will look like. So the next The next assumption that we're going to make here, or pretense that we're going to go off of, is that you're charging $50 a week for your membership. Now, I'm going to call this the low to mid range of the desired price that we want to be charging. I know I've talked in previous videos about where we should fall from a pricing perspective. Personally, I wouldn't go any lower than $50 a week unless you have a particular program that runs very infrequently. Let's say you only offer a certain class once or twice a week. Then I understand the discretion there to maybe drop that a little bit lower, but I would try and strongly recommend you to keep your prices at $50 a week or higher. So $60 a week is great, $70 a week. Those are kind of the ranges that you want to be playing in for your large group classes. But again, for the sake of this exercise today, we're going to operate under the pretense that we're charging $50 a week. Again, from a math perspective, it's pretty simple, and it's also pretty common in terms of that pricing structure, especially when you're switching from a monthly price down to a weekly price. This is a good place to start. But again, I urge you to bump that up at least just a little bit. Okay. Next up, when you have the back end meeting with your clients. So at the end of the trial, when you are looking to convert your trial members into full time members, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to require 6 weeks down. So, what that means is when somebody goes from being on a free week with you to now converting on the back end and becoming a full time member, and the objective here is a full 52-week member. So, they're signed up for a full year. We're going to require them to pay 6 weeks down. So, now what that 6 weeks down allows us to do is recoup the cost of acquiring that customer. Now, we're not going to dive too far into customer acquisition today. We've covered that before, and I'll cover that again in a lot more detail. But just to give you a high level view, again, we want to take the amount that they're giving us. So in this particular case, 50 times 6 is $300. So we want to take that $300 and in theory have the $300 they've given us and paid us ultimately cover the cost of acquiring that customer and still allowing us enough remaining to essentially purchase or get ourselves another client. So we want to look at when we do the math of customer acquisition, we want to make sure that our customer acquisition is essentially half of what our deposit is. So in the ideal world, again, using these numbers that we're already working with, it would cost us $150 when all is said and done to acquire a customer, and they'll be giving us $300 on day 7. So then that means once we've collected that $300, we theoretically can take the 150 and have repaid ourselves for acquiring that customer and take the remaining 150 and go get another customer. Again, so that's the client financed acquisition model. And that's how that allows us to really scale without ever losing any money. Okay. And always keeping us in the positive, which is exactly where we want to be. So like I said, $50 a week times 6 weeks is $300. And then what that means is after that 6 weeks is completed, they're still on a year long term with you, but they are now on week 7 all the way through to week 52 being billed at $50 a week. Okay, so this is the cash that we collect. So we're collecting $300 cash per person on the back end in the back end sales meeting. Okay, so that's on day 7. So our time to cash in our trial is 7 days. One thing I also want you guys to remember and keep in mind here is that paid in fulls are another great way for us to get cash infusions into the business. And typically speaking, statistically, 20% of all of your meetings will result in a paid in full. Now, of course, you need to approach that conversation correctly so that you're actually going for a paid in full. Because if you don't ask for all the money, you're never going to receive it. And we'll cover the specifics and the nuances of how to do that when you are going for the close. How do you get all that cash? I'll talk about that in another separate video because there's a very, very concise, clear, and relatively simple way to do it. But let's just say, under the pretense of, again, this conversation, you are doing exactly that. So you should be getting about 20% of those members to pay in full. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here is that we don't really ever want to hover over having 20% of our member base paid in full. So if you have 100 members in your facility, you shouldn't have more than 20 people who have paid up front and in full for the entire year. And the reason for that, as you'll see when we get through the remaining slides, is the recurring revenue that you get will continue to stack and is very, very important for your business. If you have too many members who are paid in full, you will not have any recurring revenue, or relatively speaking, you won't have enough recurring revenue, and you will continually need to pace your expenses. So, what we really need to do is keep that number in and around 20%. Okay. Now, let's look at, again, based on the numbers that we talked about, which was 100 leads leading to 10 sales. So, let's break down the numbers a little bit. So, we've got 10 sales. Again, operating under the understanding that 80% of those people will just put the deposit down and 20% of those people will actually pay in full. So when 8 times 300, so our 8 members who are just on their recurring membership, still signed up for the year, they're going to be giving us times 300 per person is going to equal $2,400. Okay. And the 2 that are paying in full are going to be giving us $2,080, which equals 4160. Now, again, just to clarify, what I recommend is you are going to reward somebody for paying in full. So 50 times 52 is not 2080. So how do we get to that number? That number is calculated by giving somebody a 20% discount. So when they pay in full, you're rewarding them, because we also know that when people pay in full, they typically are the most invested. And we want to reward that. They're giving us cash, which is going to help in a number of different ways, but they are paying the most upfront. So we are rewarding them for that. And cash in hand for us is always very good. So what we're going to do, their contract value is 2,600, which again is 50 times 52. And we're going to take 20% off, which is going to give us 2080. So now with 100 leads, we've sold 10. The cash that we've actually collected, which was 300 for the first 8 people, and then 2080 each for the remaining 2, that's left us with a total of 6560. Okay, so with 100 leads, we should be collecting $6,560 of cash. Okay, so not bad. So that's our start. Again, based on the 10 members that signed up, we've got 6560. Now, let's rewind a little bit to where we started. We started with our goal of being $20,000. So we've got a goal of 20, and from our 10 members, we hit 6560. Now, just simple math shows us that if we multiply that by 3, that takes us to just about 20, just under $20,000. So 6560 times 3 gives us 19,680. So that kind of gives us an indication of what we need to do with our leads. How many leads do we actually need to get us there, and how many new members, right? If we just multiply everything right now by 3, the math that we just did to get us to 6560 was based off of 10 members. So to get to a total of 19,680, just need to multiply the number of members by 3, which gives us 30 new members. So now we have our goal, our target of how many members we need per month. 30. Again, this just breaks down through math, which makes this pretty simple. So all we need to do is target 1 new member every single day. Okay? So again, let's look at the same equations that we started with, or the same breakdown that we started with. Now just looking at 300. So if we have 300 members, excuse me, take a step back. If we have 300 leads, because we know we need to get to 30 members total, then this is how that all breaks down, right? So we go from 300 leads, 180 are scheduled, 90 of them show up. We get 63 of them in on the trial. 50 of them actually show up for their final feedback meeting. And then we end up closing at 60%. We end up closing about 30.24, but we're just going to round down. So that gives us 30 new members, or 1 every single day. Now let's look at the math here. So if we have Again, that split, that 80-20 split where 80% are just going to put down the deposit, which is 6 weeks, and 20% are just going to pay in full because that's their preference, which is great for us. We now have 24 members who are going to pay the deposit, which gives us a total of 7,200. And we're going to have 6 of them now pay in full, which gives us a total of 12,480. And that's how we get to now our total revenue that we've generated in this month alone. This is our month one, right? Our quote unquote month one. We've now generated $19,680 from those 30 members. So this is where things start to get really powerful when we extrapolate this and we start to do the math on how this compounds month over month over month. So obviously we had a great month one. We had our foot on the gas. We made 20K. What we don't want to do now is start to pull off the gas and really take our foot off and take it easy, because we are really going to be able to stack cash and compound that as we continue from month one, two, three, and so on. So again, let's just look at this broken down, right? If on the 80% that are paying EFT, or they're putting the deposit down and then their $50 a week is coming out every week after that, we're getting $7,200 in cash collected. Now the contract value, because again, we're operating under the understanding that they are all signed up on a year-long term. That's $62,000 in cash that they will pay us over the contract value. So over the entirety of the year. So we just closed $62,000 of contract value, which is amazing, all in 1 month. And again, with the 20% that actually paid in full, there were 6 of them, 12,480, and their contract value and their cash collected are exactly the same because they are paying that all at once. So what that means for our business, again, we talked about the cash collected, which is just under 20, but for the actual contract value now for our business, which if you fast forward to the end of the year, from those 30 sales, we will have collected just under $75,000 of revenue. Pretty good, right? So that's month one. Let's take a look at month two once we start to stack these. So if we look at month two, what we need to consider here is, let's say we just do exactly the same thing that we did in month one. And that's where we have the same 24 new members signing up at $300 each. We have the same, or quote unquote, we have another, not the same, we have another 6 members paying in full for another 12,480. But what we also have now is the 24 members from the first month who are going to be paying us when their 6 weeks end. So that's why you can see here, I have a line for previous members at $50 times 2, because they will have their first 6 weeks will run out halfway through month 2. So now what that means is halfway through month 2, they will each pay us $50 a week for the remaining time in month 2. So now that's going to give us an additional $2,400. So whereas in month one, we collected 19,680. And again, we're operating month one under the pretense that we had 0 members to start with. So now on month two, we have the 30 members from the original month, and we have the 30 members that we just signed up from this month. Now, we're not taking into account any churn at the moment, just for simplicity's sake, because churn is the number of members that we lose every month, the percentage of members that we lose every month. And that will hover roughly between 5 and 10%. But we're not going to add that in just yet, because that will definitely play a factor into this, but it won't move the needle too much for us to worry about just right now. So now we're at 60 members, and the cash collected now on month two is $22,080. So again, we just made about 19,000, well, just under 20,000 in month one, and just over 20,000, 22,000 now on month two. So if we take a look at month three, and this now is where things start to get really powerful, because we are now stacking month one members and month two members as we sign up 30 new people in month three. So you can see month one members is showing now 50 times 4.3, because those EFT recurring revenue members are paying us now for every week in month three. Whereas the members we sign up in month two are again only paying us for half the month. So now what we've done is we've collected an additional 5160 from the first group, from the members from month one. So what that means now is we've now added an additional five or so $1,000 to our top line. So now the cash collected or the revenue from month three is $27,000. So we've gone from just under 20, right? 19 to 22, now to 27. So you can see we're really starting to stack this cash month over month. And now, just for the sake of it, let's take a look at month four. And you can start to see the trend here, right? So month one, we've got those members who are now paying us another 5160. We now have the members from month two also paying us an additional 5160. And then the members from month three now, halfway through month four, are starting to pay us again. So now we've got another 2400. And then again, you can now look at the bottom. We now have 90 total members, and our cash collected is 32,400. Okay. Now I understand that this might seem daunting. How do we sign up 90 new members in 3 months? I promise you, this is the beautiful thing about the math actually being here. When you have an acquisition system like what we're outlining in the ads to actually fuel those leads and feed them into your business, this is not only extremely possible, but this is exactly how it's going to happen. So, the ad cost is always a big question here. What type of money do we need to spend? So, obviously, we talked about, sure, after 3 months, we're making 30. After 3 months and into month four, we're now making $32,000 of revenue. That's great. But how much do we need to actually spend to generate that? And there's a few different answers to that question. So, what I've done is I've outlined your low, medium, and high of what you can expect in terms of cost per lead. So, if you are running ads, and what we typically see is somewhere between the $5 to $10 range. If we're in that $5 to $10 range, we're doing something very well and it's working. If we start to hover around the $15 a lead, then that's when we need to jump in and make sure that we are making some not drastic overhauls, but we're going to need some new copy. We're going to need some new imagery, things to really just entice our audience to opt in and just get attracted to our ad and really just dive in a little further to actually get that lead cost back down. So if you're really crushing it, as we see pretty often, our lead cost is only $5 a lead. And at 300 leads per month, that's only a $1,500 ad spend. That's very, very reasonable. Now on the high end, if we're looking at $15 a lead, again, for 300, that's $4,500 a month, which again, we're starting to get a little higher now, but we're talking about being in a place where we're generating over $20,000 of revenue per month. So that's not so bad when you look at what you're spending for what you're getting. But let's just take the middle ground. Let's say it's $10 a lead. You've got a $3,000 ad spend, which is about $100 a day, and you're getting $19,680 in return. Would you spend 3,000 to make 19,680? This is based on month one. And I imagine the answer to that question is probably yes. So achieving these types of numbers are extremely, extremely doable. Like we've talked about before, having a system in place where you can actually think about it, think about it like having a machine that's operating. So you have the different pieces of the system all set up the different areas of your machine that can generate you leads, and then your pipeline and your funnels and your automations to allow you to handle that volume. Because if you can handle that volume at scale, then you will be able to just plug all of the leads and you can ramp up your spend if you want more. You can taper down your spend if you can't manage what you have. Either are okay because over time, the cash will continue to stack month over month. So we've built out automations to allow you to plug in 300, 400, 500 leads per month and be able to reach this level where you are now generating up to $20,000 or even more per month in cash collected. And again, when you see how that stacks, this is how we are able to get our clients and our gyms and my own gyms to a point where we're now able to reinvest. We're able to start paying ourselves more. We can basically have that level of financial freedom that we're looking for. It's the reason why we got into this whole thing. So this again is the step by step of how the numbers actually break down in achieving $20,000 months. So it's very possible, it's very doable. All we need is the system in place. And again, as you start to acquire the skills needed, your lead nurture skills will improve, as your sales skills improve, as all of these things are going to improve. The numbers that I showed you are just the baseline industry averages. Once you are elevating your performance above that, the sky's the limit. And if your prices are above that and your sales skills, like I said, are above the industry average, pulling those levers will give you incredible results. So, rewatch this, take a look at the statistics, see how it all breaks down from a numbers standpoint. And I promise you, you will be able to add $20,000 to your top line every single month. It's extremely, extremely possible. Okay. Thanks for going through this with me, guys. Have an amazing rest of your week. If you have any questions, if you want the slides that I gave so you can take a look in a little bit more detail, if you have any questions, if you want the sales scripts, if you want to see the automations I built out to help you get $20,000 in your bank account every single month, shoot me a message, reach out to us, and we will see you next week. Take care, guys.